Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Empowered Hormones podcast. I'm your host, Sheradyn, and today I have the privilege of speaking to Shelley Mckenzie. So, Shelley's been in the health industry for over 15 years, which is impressive, and is a mama three clinical nutritionist and naturopath, and the co host of the No BS to Motherhood podcast. So, thank you so much for jumping on today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Sheridan. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, I love that you bring an area that to, I guess, the nutrition space that I don't dive into at all, really. It's not my jam. It's not my area. It's something that always pops up when you work with women, obviously, pregnancy and postpartum. But I feel like it's one of those things that you want to niche in, like, because you don't want to stuff around with it. I don't know. Like, I'm really cautious of when someone's pregnant or, postpartum going, okay, nutrients, yes, IBS stuff, yes, still testing, hit me with it. But when it's more specific, I'm like, nah, you really want to get a good book or see a good naturopath or nutritionist in that space.
Yeah, I totally agree. All of my extra education, I guess, is all around pregnancy and postpartum because you do want to make sure that you're really staying up with the latest research and because things are changing all the time. So it definitely is an area, I guess, that keeps me on my toes. But having had three pregnancies, successful pregnancies myself and a miscarriage, I also, I guess, just really value this time. And I think I I can really see how impactful what you do in pregnancy, how impactful, what you do in pregnancy, it just translates, right? It just pays off for that postpartum period and then how you're able to show up to your baby and to yourself during that period too. So I think that's why I became so passionate in this area, just because I was like, oh, when you actually eat a certain way or look at your blood pathology and you can see what your markers are doing and you understand why they're taking a hit or why they're dropping, but then how, if you get those markers up, how then that plays into your postpartum, you can literally show up in an entirely different way. I think there's that common misconception of once you've had a baby, you just kind of feel like shit.
Well,
And
yeah, I hear that all the time from women. They're like, and there's no point putting more work in because I'm just going to have another baby and I'll just go through the same thing. And I'm like, I haven't had kids, but I'm like, surely that is not the norm. Like, why are women doing that?
yeah, and it's not the norm, right? I had three kids under three. So I currently have a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And to be honest, I feel pretty fabulous most of the time. Obviously, I have my ups and down days, especially when there was the newborn phase, but I still generally felt really well to the point where I chose to go back and have another baby quite quickly because I just felt so ready within myself. And again, that was, I think, a lot to do with what I did in that preconception and pregnancy.
If you've been in the health industry for over 15 years, so this is, and your oldest kid, you said is 4, 3, 4. Yeah. So when did your passion for this area kick off then? Because for me, gut health is my thing because I had such a chronic gut history and that's what helped me. But I can imagine if I fell pregnant in 3, 4 years time, I'd probably almost niche off into that because I'm like, I want to know more. So how did you sort of get to this point?
Yeah, so my journey, I guess, started as a personal trainer. And so I was a personal trainer back in the day, kind of loving life and I guess not living my best, healthiest life either. I was 18, just moved to the country. I was partying a lot. And I say that, Monday to Friday, I was living that typical um, ate what I thought was healthy and exercise, but come weekend, I was binge drinking, I wasn't sleeping, I was backing up, I was going through Macca's at 3 a.m., right? And that lasted until I was 24. And at that age, I got diagnosed with a now very common condition called Hashimoto's, a thyroid condition. But back then, I would say I certainly hadn't heard of it. So this is going back, what, 13, 14 years ago now. So I'm 30, 36, 37 this year. Yeah. I'm trying to do the maths quickly.
It's over 30, you don't care anymore. It's all
You
the same.
forget, don't you? You just forget. So I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's at 24, and it took a long time to find my diagnosis, and my health really disintegrated very quickly. And if I think back to that period in my life, my body was definitely telling me earlier that to pull things in, to stop the partying, and I just kept ignoring it. And eventually my body was like, all right, well, you're not listening, so let's shut you down. And that's literally what happened to me. So I lost almost 15 kilos, and I didn't have that to lose. Um, I literally became so fragile and sick that doctors had to come to me. I couldn't go to them. I literally had to get carried to the bathroom. Like I couldn't even walk. I just had nothing in me. And this went on for about 6 weeks until finally and my diagnosis, I should say, went from everything from, she's got cancer, to, this is just a Epsom bar, like a glandular fever thing. And I was like, none of this is really making a whole lot of sense. And it was at that point when I finally got my diagnosis. I was given a bag of pills, like literally. And I was told to take one of these every day for the rest of my life. And that would help manage my thyroid and therefore my symptoms. And again, I didn't know much at that point, but it just did not feel right. Like I knew I had so much wiggle room in my diet and lifestyle to work with. And so I took the bag of pills because I believe time and a place for medication. However, I knew for me, that wasn't going to be the first place I started. And to be honest, I just felt like my health couldn't get any worse than where it was. Like I was in a really bad way. And my now husband and I, we were heading over to India, and we were riding a motorcycle down the coastline for 6 weeks, which was wild and so cool. And we were told not to go, obviously. I was still so sick. And this is only weeks after my diagnosis. But we went. And I guess a large part of that is because I really started looking at Ayurvedic medicine and the herbs and the spices and just the foods of the Indian culture. And I thought, no, I'm going to go across and I'm going to start playing around with my diet and see what happens. So we did that for 6 weeks. And as soon as I got home, I enrolled in a nutritional medicine course. And that's where this part of my journey began. So for a long time, I practiced just as a nutritionist, and very much in the food is medicine principle, because I healed myself. To this day, I've never needed that medication. And I'd go to the doctors and they'd do my blood tests. So initially, I was very conscious that without medication, I needed to be checking my thyroid very regularly. So every 4 weeks, I'd go and do it. Even in India, I went to one of the hospitals over there to check my blood work, which was just an experience in itself. And I started paying a lot of attention to what my bloods were telling me. And doctors are going, oh, wow, this is amazing. The medication's working. And at the beginning, I didn't tell them I wasn't on the medication. And they kept saying, yeah, everything's looking really good. Like, and my appointments spread out from 4 weeks to 6 weeks to 3 months to then yearly. And it was at the yearly point, they're like, yeah, we don't need to change your dose. Everything's looking great. And I said, oh, to be honest, I've never actually taken it. And they were just gobsmacked. Like, they did not know that diet and lifestyle impacted your thyroid in any way, which to me just blew me away. So I was in that space for a long time, and thyroid very much ties into now what I do in the pregnancy space. And we can chat about that as well and how that ties in. But that was kind of my area for quite some time. And then I went and studied naturopathy because just social media was becoming, there was more and more people coming out and more people without qualifications. And I just really wanted it to be clear that I had a bachelor and I was qualified. So I went on then to study naturopathy. And at that point, I studied all through my pregnancies and having babies, and only qualified as a naturopath about 2 years ago. So I guess to answer your question, that was a long-winded answer, but I became very passionate about pregnancy nutrition when I first conceived. I had a miscarriage at 12 weeks. And it was at that point, again, there was very little information on how to help my body to heal. And I just wanted to learn everything I could about that preconception phase so that I could heal my body and be able to fall pregnant successfully. And this is where I guess the thyroid comes into it. I was always told when you get to the point of having babies, you'll probably experience miscarriages because of your thyroid. And that always kind of stuck with me. And I guess I never really looked into that further until I experienced that miscarriage and knowing firsthand what that felt like, both mentally and physically on my body. I was just like, I do not want other women to experience this. And again, like when you're going through the Western medicine and you're falling pregnant, there's so many tests are being missed and so many things aren't being looked at. And it just breaks my heart that it's 1 in 3 women experiencing miscarriage, yet they don't actually do any further testings until you've experienced 3 miscarriages or more. And I was just like, that's not good enough. So that's where this passion really for pregnancy nutrition, I guess, really started, was there.
I love that. And I also love because it started so long ago. And you're right, this whole thyroid space now, same as gut health space, like it has blown up, right? Like if you said to someone, like, what does gut health mean? What's thyroid health mean? They've got some preconceived ideas, whether it's true or not, whatever, because there's so much social media and hype and Instagram and information out there correctly or incorrectly. But when you were first going through it, it's almost like you're pioneering for yourself because there is nowhere, and it was the same with my gut health stuff. There's none of the functional medicine, there was none of the comprehensive testing. Like it was all, you kind of really got to work for it in a sense. And then you sort of get to this stage now where you kind of look back and you're like, wow, there is so much information around there, but now there's also so much misinformation as well. And you're still having women, like you said, like if it takes 3, which is wild, before they do the testing, you kind of like, how's the medical system not caught up to where people like you are is crazy.
It's unbelievable, right? And I see a lot of women still with thyroid issues, particularly those who are in their postpartum pregnancy or preconception phase. And it's wild to me. Like I had a client last week and her thyroid antibodies were through the roof. They were like 1300, and at 1300 they stopped testing. So they were, who knows where they were. And she'd had 2 miscarriages already and no one had looked at her thyroid antibodies. And then when she came to me, and that was the first place that we looked, was what's your thyroid doing? What are your antibodies doing? And I said to her, I can't diagnose, obviously, but I really think we need to work on these antibodies because that is what could be contributing to your miscarriages. Anyway, she then went on to see an endocrinologist and went to a miscarriage clinic, and both of them said, yeah, look, your antibodies probably are what's causing your miscarriages, but we can't do anything about those.
Oh,
I'm like, yeah, we can. It's just that thyroxine, which is commonly prescribed, doesn't touch your antibodies. But from a nutritional point of view, we have so much research, but no one's looking at that stuff
yeah, you're right.
except
And
for us,
yeah,
except for
exactly.
nutritionists, dietitians, naturopaths.
Yeah, and also it's taken to her having a miscarriage to see that. Like imagine if she wasn't trying to have a baby, right? Like sure at some point it might impact her periods, but it may not. Like sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But like she may not have known for another 5, 6, 7 years, and then who knows what else it was damaging or what else the immune system's kicked off in. Like that's it's crazy, isn't it?
Wild, right? Yeah.
With
So
with the thyroid, because I know, like, from what you've said, it obviously impacts miscarriages, but it can also impact your periods, yeah?
it can. Not every woman will present like that. I certainly don't. Like I still had a really regular period, and still now when I'm in like a flare, I still have a really regular period. Some women though, it will affect, but I honestly don't find that to be one of the common symptoms.
Yeah.
And this is where in your postpartum, and sorry to kind of jump around a little bit, even pregnancy, the symptoms of say Hashimoto's really mimic those of pregnancy, especially those of postpartum. So it's the weight fluctuation or really hard to lose weight. It's the hair loss, it's the bloating, the constipation, all of the fatigue. Those are the kind of symptoms that seem to be more common than an irregular period. I'd have to say in my clinic anyway. But yes, missed periods or irregular periods is certainly a part of the picture in some women with Hashimoto's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, so normally with Hashimoto's present, women can fall pregnant if their period is regular, but then it's the miscarriage component that is the risk. And a part of that is those antibodies. So our antibodies are essentially what how we diagnose, or how the Western world diagnose a thyroid condition. If there's antibodies present, then there's a thyroid condition there. But those antibodies can be bubbling away under the surface for up to 10 years before they actually, before your TSH, T3, T4 are are affected, and so when we're going to the doctors, normally we're only testing TSH. It's a very broad reference range in the Western world, and if that comes back irregular, then they might check your T4, maybe T3, but still your antibodies aren't tested.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I
find, yeah, it's crazy. All of mine I have to get done privately. Like to get a GP to do it is just like impossible. But then that begs the question. So thyroid, like when someone's coming to you preconception and either they've had a miscarriage or they're like, hey, I'm struggling to fall pregnant, you're obviously testing the thyroid. Are there other blood tests that you routinely go, cool, we need to test these things as well?
Yeah, for sure. So just from like a general nutrient perspective, we know that iron can affect fertility. We know that vitamin D, particularly like low vitamin D and it's low iron, can also play into miscarriage in that picture as well. So if a woman's coming, like ideally, we really want your vitamin D around that 80 or above in preconception. In Australia, vitamin D deficiency is just so prevalent here. And most women, again, the reference range for a doctor's at 50, but that's too low. And so, again, that's a nutrient I'm looking at because the research is there that if that is low, it can contribute to a miscarriage picture. So yeah, iron, vitamin D. We're obviously looking at your folate and your homocysteine as well. We really want to make sure, again, we're wanting to make sure there's no gene mutation. So MTHFR is the common gene that's not or it hasn't been a part of the preconception screening in the Western world, but we know that over 50% of women carry this gene, and that affects our ability to process folate in the body. And folate's really important for the prevention of neural tube defects. So again, even though we can't always get that tested, I always say to women, we need to be on an activated version of your folate. What else do I get tested? Obviously, your hormones. So again, if it's just preconception, we're always looking at your hormones, even if you have a healthy pregnancy, because if we can optimize those then fabulous. Sorry, healthy period. If we can optimize those, then that's great. But also, we want to look at things like, are you ovulating? Because a lot of women actually don't really know exactly when they ovulate or can't really pinpoint their symptoms, which is key for falling pregnant. So we really want to be looking at your estrogen, your progesterone. Progesterone is really important, again, holding pregnancy. So the reference range for a doctor's above 30, but we really like to see that above 40 from a naturopathic point of view so that we can ensure that we're ruling out any risk of miscarriage once conception has occurred. Because again, progesterone, unless you're pushing for that in your first trimester, not even tested.
Wow. And do you reckon they're probably the two biggest sort of things that link towards miscarriage, like low progesterone and thyroid concerns? Would they be some of the two most popular ones you see?
Yeah, they would definitely be the biggest ones I see in my clinic, and the low vitamin D, which is hard to say if that's a reason, but I see low vitamin D all the time in those cases as well.
Interesting. I wonder why. I wonder why the low vitamin D, like the progesterone to me makes sense because everyone's stressed and we're not ovulating properly and our body's in fight or flight. Like I can kind of see, and I do see those patterns very common in a Dutch test and stuff. But I wonder why, like the vitamin D is an interesting one.
Yeah, I've got some research on it that I'll send it to you and you can put it in your show notes. I can't remember the specifics of it now off the top of my head, but I will send you some of my research on that so you can have a little look. And if anyone's interested, they can also jump on and have a look.
Yeah, because that's super interesting. Because then, if you're thinking about nutrition for fertility, obviously foods that are rich in vitamin D is going to be a no brainer. And then things that support thyroid health. So, when you're talking to a female before she's falling pregnant, what kind of foods or nutritional areas are you going, hey, go and eat these, go eat sardines, go eat eggs, go eat whatever it is that are really going to support them through that?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess with the fertility space, it's one of these areas where, again, lots of information on the internet, and my approach doesn't hit, home for everyone. But I'm also really mindful of stress. And I think when we're cutting too much out of the diet, it can start to cause a lot of stress on a woman, which is also impactful for fertility and then miscarriage as well, right? So I actually come at fertility really looking at, yes, your blood work and what your family history is and all of those kind of things so we can support your thyroid and, make sure you're getting in all that good stuff from that point of view. But I think it's also really important to look at the overall stress picture. And so, first and foremost, there's not much I cut out during the fertility picture. So I know some people will be like, cut out, you know, grains, cut out alcohol, cut out sugar, cut out gluten, cut out dairy. Like I am not about that. So I basically leave everything in the diet, unless obviously there's like, some gut issues or something. I'd be like, hey, go to Sheradyn. She can sort out. And if you tell them that part, then that's fine. But from a fertility perspective, like I pretty well leave everything in, even alcohol, which is some people are like, what? Alcohol's still in the diet. And I'm like, well, alcohol brings social connectedness. And yes, if we can reduce it and cut that to some extent, great. Like, I obviously don't want you drinking 5 days a week or even every week. But if you've got a wedding where you want to go and have a few wines, or if you've got a girls' day and you want to go do that, like go do that, because not drinking can actually create more stress. So I just want to say that first, because I think it is a really overwhelming
Mm,
time for a lot of women, particularly when on social media.
yeah.
So basically what I'm doing is looking at, like, I still want the complex carbs in your diet, like ideally those lower GI carbohydrates to support the menstrual cycle, but also, the healthy insulin levels and regulating blood sugars as well. So normally I'd be saying a quarter of a cup up to a cup, depending on, your activity levels and all of that kind of stuff in your three main meals. And that would be brown rice, quinoa, um, buckwheat, sweet potatoes, lentils, those kind of foods. Your healthy fats is another really big one for healthy hormones as well. Our hormones need fats, and most women are missing out on fat as just a general macronutrient. So I normally have a little bit of a rule of thumb that when it comes to your fats, breakfast and lunch, you're having at least one healthy fat in your diet, and lunchtime, you're having three healthy fats. And the reason for that is because normally between lunch and dinner is like the biggest space for a meal. And so, in order to help with your energy levels, blood stabilization, like your blood sugar levels, all of that kind of stuff, I like to add a really big, nice chunk into your lunch meals. So, again, your healthy fats are like avocado, nut seeds, olive oils, goat's cheese, all of that kind of stuff. And then protein. So, I do actually add quite like protein's obviously really important in general, and most women aren't hitting their needs. But I also really like to add soy-based proteins into a woman's diet just to help regulate her hormones as well, no matter what she's got going on. So soy's had a really bad rap for many years about, yeah.
So she even like with I get clients asking about it about thyroid stuff all the time as well, and they're all like, "I can never," and I'm like, "There's just from a microbiome point of view, there's benefits to plant-based foods, right? Like I'm not plant-based, but I understand the benefits from it. So I love that you're bringing that up and chatting about it because I get asked so often. I'm like, oh, here we go.
And I think it is. It's like, it's one of these things that no matter which area you specialize in from a nutritionist, naturopath point of view, you get asked about soy. But again, the research is compelling on soy based foods in basically all areas of health. But yet it's been really, we're told to cut it out. But I think that's because of the really processed soy foods that have come about in more recent years. Whereas, like, you and I are talking more about the whole food, GMO free soy, right? So that's, I guess, the important part of the soy picture. Like when you are having the ideally organic, whole food versions of soy, it is beautiful for your hormones and other areas like your gut. So yeah, I think it's important to be adding some of those like tofu and tempeh and, your miso and all of that kind of stuff in as well.
Yeah, I love that. Do you, as a side note, do you not push on, but you encourage the, female women that you're working with who are falling pregnant to extend this nutritional information to their partners as well? Like, because I'm assuming, I don't know, but I'm assuming you're working just with the female who's falling pregnant, but obviously sperm health plays a role too, like from my limited kind of knowledge.
Yeah, for sure. So if it's possible, I'm seeing the male. Like last night I had a couples consult, and tomorrow I've got one as well where I see both male and female within the consult. But honestly, it's rare. Most women are kind of doing this on their own. It's the odd male who will come forward. Normally, what I see, which is kind of sad, is the male steps up after they're having trouble conceiving. And I guess from a sperm point of view, we can change sperm parameters within 3 months. And so that's what I'm working on with my males when I see them is, we also look at blood work, ideally a semen analysis. Um, but yeah, it's kind of, I 95% of the time I'm seeing the female and not their partner initially. And it's not unless they're having troubles that the male then's like, you know what, I'm going to do my thing too.
Yeah, because it's interesting, isn't it? Like, I feel like it's another area that it's not always talked about enough, but it's kind of just assumed that the female's gonna go do all the work or eat all the food or whatever. And I see it with gut health, right? Like, I see the female actually struggling to hold through. Say she's got severe SIBO overgrowth, she's struggling to stick to the dietary perimeters while we, rebalance this infection because the partner, not that they're unsupportive, but they don't really care as much. So then they're like, well, we'll just go out and eat or drink all these foods or whatever. And it's just she's left feeling terrible because she's like, oh, I feel so bad, but doesn't want to step up and be like, no, I'm not going to eat that. Like it can be quite a mismatch sometimes, I find.
Absolutely. And I bet you if she's like farting and, all of that, they're like, ew, yuck.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's just
Um,
one of those things, and it is hard to get it across as well. Like I know even some females are coming to you and they're getting all this support, and they're like, okay, if it is quite different, like for me, it wouldn't be hard to adjust to what you say because I live a pretty healthy lifestyle anyway. But if you're readjusting quite a few things, she's already got this mental load of like, okay, I'm trying to readjust and make these changes and do what Shelley says, but then also, yeah, you've got to have that supportive network around you, it makes a difference.
yeah, it really does. And I guess from a fertility perspective, if the female's put in all this work and then her partner steps up 6 months later because they've struggled for 6 months, which again isn't uncommon, then it's going to take another 3 months. Like, so, say he did go and get his semen analysis done, and we see that his sperm motility is like lacking or something like that. Like, that takes 3 months to then change that. So, although they can continue trying to conceive within those 3 months if they choose to, that's still another 3 months. So now we're going on to 9 months, and that can be really hard for a female to swallow as well, particularly when she's invested so much into the last 6 months to only find out that he actually needed to work on some things as well. So even if you can't convince your partner to go and see a nutritionist and work on things, sometimes honestly seeing a male nutritionist is easier. And so, if you want to reach out, I'm happy to direct you in a way if you feel like a male would suit your partner best. But even if they go and get basic bloods and a semen analysis, which they do have to push for when they're going to their GP, but that's a good starting place because I always say GPs are general practitioners, so general health, and you would see this all the time, Sheradyn. So that means their reference levels are based on general population. It doesn't matter whether you're a pregnant woman, a 50-year-old male, or a 20-year-old healthy male, right? It's general reference ranges. And so, but within saying that, if your partner has gone and got those things tested and the GP has said everything is in check, then generally speaking, he's within range. So nothing's too bad. However, like going and seeing somebody who can actually then look at these from an optimal point of view and look at the reference ranges to say conceive is going to be really beneficial. But that would be his starting place, is just going, getting the test done. And then from there, you might have a little bit of an easier time convincing him to go the extra step.
Yeah, for sure. What's your ideal for females? Like, if someone hadn't, like, say, I haven't had any miscarriages, but like, if I met someone and I was like, hey, I'm thinking about getting pregnant in the next, 3, 6, 9 months, when would your ideal time be to someone to reach out to you, say, hey, can we get blood work? Can we start making these changes? Like, what's your time frame look like?
Look, I always say by 3 months, definitely, like 3 months prior, because we can manipulate hormones if we need to and get markers up. Obviously, I'm also guided by the female, though. If she's like, listening to this and like, yep, Shell, I'm going to get this going, but we're starting next month, like, that's fine too. I just need to make sure my treatment plan is a little bit more aggressive, but ideally 3 months, minimum 3 months, ideally 6 months, particularly if there is any hormonal imbalance, which you will generally know based on your cycle, then that gives us a lot more time to actually see what's going on.
Do you tend to work with your clients throughout pregnancy and postpartum, or do you find like you've set up a really good groundwork? They usually got the skills, the resources, and you're picking up newer clients who might come to you in pregnancy or in postpartum going, oh, well, classically, I'm nutrient depleted. I didn't do the thing. I didn't work with you beforehand. And they come to you just completely flat, burnt out.
Yeah, combination, honestly. My books are like my clients are a little bit of everything. Like some women I start working with as pregnancy, like whether it be first trimester, some women I get as late as third trimester. And then always new clients in the postpartum period because again, they're just made to feel like it's normal to feel like shit. And then they obviously listen to things like this or see different people on Instagram, like, somewhat thriving with children. They're like, hang on a minute.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
do see lots of women in the postpartum and also a lot of women in postpartum who are gearing up to go again and understand that second and beyond pregnancies is a different ball game when you're chasing after a baby or toddler or child. Like, so a lot of women are preparing themselves in that postpartum period for their next pregnancy.
Because that's actually quite a tricky space as a practitioner because I find it quote unquote hard enough with women who are working and need a meal prep and stuff like that. And they've got SIBO, candida or yeast or parasites, whatever. Then the ones who are mums and are trying to do that stuff, and you would have the same. Like if someone has a young child, a 1 or a 2 year old, and they're either pregnant or whatever, then all of a sudden, yeah, your hands are full. Or like you, 3 young kids now, like your meal prep, your nutrition has to be forefront of your mind. Otherwise, it'd be so easy to drop it. And I see bums who just eat the leftovers or the scraps and don't get any protein because it all goes to the kids. It's a hard area.
It is. And full disclosure, like I've been there. And I think that's probably what makes me a really great practitioner in this space is because like I'm not perfect. My kids' diets are pretty perfect. um, as you just said, like we prioritize them, right? But no, I actually did a reel at one point where I'm like, and it was funny because I caught myself doing it and press record. I was literally eating scraps off my kids' plate, and that's what I would call breakfast. So I've been there and I go in and out still of, supporting myself nutritionally and then just like falling into bad habits. And I actually said to my husband only days ago, we've had a really like full busy kind of period. And I said to him, I'm falling into bad habits. Like all of a sudden I'm skipping meals. I'm having 3 coffees a day, like, and I felt that, but within a few days I was able to acknowledge it and then start the process of turning that around because I just now know how good I feel when I'm supporting myself. And I guess for other mums, they get to that point as well. We all go there. We go through harder stages where the sleep deprivation hits us a bit harder or just the general stress of motherhood and life or whatever else. But I think we also get to a point where we do feel well and we can recognize it quicker and quicker. So I, in my earlier days with the kids, would have gone months in those patterns and then been like, come on, Shell. Like, and it would take my husband prepping meals for me and him really jumping on board and supporting me as well. So when he did his meal preps, he would do extra for me. And that would literally be the only way I ate is if he fed me. And I'm a nutritionist, right? And so, but now going in a few years later, like that time is becoming less and less. And I think I'm starting to find the groove with much easier meals. And I just have this mantra that doesn't need to be perfect. I just need to be fed. And so, some days it's literally just like a cup of rice with a tin of tuna, and I've got some cucumber, feta, olives, and I just chop it all up and throw it into a salad. Like, and that is my lunch. But that's far better than skipping a meal. And
Yeah.
so I think it's just like also preparing yourself. And the other thing that we've found as well in our household is the more organized we are, the better. And so, again, because we've had this busy time period, like I've literally been home for 9 days in 6 weeks with the kids. So we've been just like here, there, and everywhere. And we haven't done meal prep and we haven't done any shopping. But generally speaking, that is a non negotiable. Like Sundays for us are literally like kids' sports. And then the after days, the afternoons, the market run, we have a full meal plan done for our week, and we just go through recipe books and find easy meals. My hubby cooks a couple of meals that I just have in the fridge that are there for the night. Like it's really about setting yourself up because it's so easy to let the ball go at any given day.
Yeah, 100%. And because you've got that baseline, right? So your baseline is like, I know I can grab a pack of rice, a tin of tuna, and some olives. Like they flipping don't go off. They can stay in the fridge and it won't matter. Like you can fall back into that. So then you can imagine, obviously, when someone doesn't have that, hey, I can chuck a, thing of roast veggies in and I've got that. If you don't have that sort of habits or they haven't worked with someone like you or built those skill sets, it's really tricky then, right? Because you're going off, well, I guess I'll buy, like, get some crackers or whatever without thinking there's no protein and no fat in that. So when you build that baseline, you can go protein, carbs, fat. Is it there? Pull it in. It doesn't have to be fresh and perfect, but you've got something to work with, which is so much better.
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, sometimes it could just take 1 or 2 sessions to build those basics, and then you've got that knowledge there.
Yeah.
Right? Knowledge is power. Like as soon as you've learned it, it's really hard to unlearn. And even though you might, miss a few beats every now and again and kind of fall off what you know, you will come back to it because now you know how to feel.
Yeah, and it comes back to that whole motivation thing. Like know how good you can feel. So you're going to get yourself back there. And then when you feel good there, you do more, you meal prep more because you feel good, you've got more energy, your blood sugars are stable. Whereas, like, when you let yourself dip and then you dip again and then you skip meals again, you have too much coffee, it's like you lose energy, you lose motivation, and you just go, you spiral. Like, you've really got to be able to go, okay, no, that's enough. We're done with that.
Yeah. And you know what? The people who cop it the most are your kids and your husband,
Yeah.
right? Your partner. So like I know for me, when I'm like undernourished in the day, I'm cranky.
Yeah.
My kids cop that. Like, and they don't deserve that. And so I'm like, just feed yourself, Shelley, even if it's a few scrambled eggs with a quarter of an avocado and some toast. Like, just put something in your mouth. Like, you are feeding your children gold standard. Like, just make extra for yourself. You know what I mean? Like, but again, sometimes as well, depending on where your headspace is, like, motherhood's a trip. It's a wild ride, right? And so you will have days where you're feeling it hard and like all the feels, and those days are really hard to actually motivate yourself to make the meals. And that's where having a bit of meal prep or just having even just some meals thrown in your fridge, or in your freezer that are the prepped meals from the supermarket, like Dynamic or something, they go a long way because at least you're still putting food in your body and no one else is going to cop your like anger, because then that just sends you in another spiral, like, oh, well, now I feel like shit because I've just yelled at my kids all day. But really, when I sit back and reflect, like, I know it was because I was hungry, I had too much coffee, and I probably needed to drink some water.
Yeah, 100%. And then you also know that's going to impact your next period, which is going to impact your mood, which might impact your thyroid. And then you might be putting on weight because your thyroid's unhappy. So then you cut your food. Like, it's just it's a whole cycle. Being a woman's wild.
Oh, when you put it like that, geesh.
It's just, yeah, you're right. So learning those basics, re-establishing stuff and sort of like building up from there, like that in itself is so important. And then, like you said, if people are struggling with miscarriage, with falling pregnant, then you can also go that next step and be like, hey, Shelley, now what? Like, now what's my working plan? So I love it how there's both things there. It's like, we need our baseline. We need to know what to like turn back to, regardless of whether you're having fertility issues or not. And then when you are having fertility issues, you can also take that next step and be like, right, let's unpack what's going on here. No, it's great.
Yeah, and I think like, the other thing with us women is like we are fucking superwomen,
Yeah.
like like what we can do just blows me away on a daily basis. Like, and so I think as well we need to give ourselves a little bit more credit because throwing something in the microwave or just having a little bit of time and, space for yourself to organize meals, even if it's just getting your kids out the door for an hour so that you can do that on a weekend, like you can do that. You can prioritize yourself because at the end of the day, it's like that domino effect and you're the one standing at the front. And as soon as you fall and topple over, the rest does as well. And I literally see that all the time. It's just like as soon as mum goes, everything else goes. But at the end of the day, what we do in our general day-to-day life is just astonishing. And I think, just preparing the food and stuff, like it's just another part of that, that's so important and that's often not prioritized.
Yeah, no, I get that 100%. That was awesome. Thank you. I feel like there's so much information in there. You covered so much stuff. But for those who do want to know more, website is freedomwellness.com.au. That's
Yep.
correct. Yep. Awesome. And Instagram, Shelley Mckenzie. I'll link this in for you guys as well. Underscore naturopath is the best place to find you on Insta. Cool. And then I'll also link in your podcast because you're the co-host. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Of the No BS Approach to Motherhood podcast.
Awesome. How long have you guys been doing a podcast for?
So I've been doing a podcast for about 7 years, but the No BS has been running now for we're just about to release our fourth season. So it's about 2 years now. And as you would imagine, it's all about motherhood, but my co-host is also a epic nutritionist. And so it's all about, nutrition for both you as a mum or trying to conceive. It's about your kids' nutrition. And then we get on lots of guests, and we will have to have you on, Sheradyn, forgot.
It's really interesting the amount of women, they sort of come to me like, I want to say 12 months out of there, for 6 to 12 months out going, I've got severe IBS or there's SIBO and stuff going on. And then they're sort of doing that journey beforehand, which I just love because, the whole mother's microbiome, baby's microbiome, that awareness, but also passing on those infections and things. But it's interesting. And I love it when women are so self-motivated about that. Like I would be like, hey, my gut's fine, but I want to work with someone prior to falling pregnant. Like, I love that it's becoming a little bit more of a norm rather than just let's just roll into it and see what happens. Like, it's nice to feel prepared.
Absolutely. And I, again, like on the flip side to that, I see a lot of women in the postpartum period who have had to, out of their own control, I guess their circumstances, they've had to have antibiotics or they've ended up having a C-section or what have you. And they hold that, they hold that weight with them, particularly when Barb is then, months on and having digestive issues. And I always say to them, like, time and place, like you had to do what you had to do and what felt right to you. But I think having the gut sorted prior to pregnancy and just knowing that you did what you could, I feel like it just helps women let go a little bit to what can be the unknown when they're coming out the other side as well. Like they did what they could, and therefore their baby still inherited that, and it had all that time growing for 9 months in that beautiful microbiome and having all access to all of that, not that they grow in the microbiome, but and even like your vaginal microbiome and all of that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
The amount of like, I have so many women who come into my program either have thrush or BV or herpes or any kind of vaginal infections as well. And I'm like, well, like lower vaginal microbiome, increased risk of like miscarriage and stuff as well. So it is like, I love that women are thinking about it more, going, hey, gut, nutrition, like that all impacts that vaginal microbiome as well, which is fascinating.
Absolutely. We'll do a whole topic on this.
Won't get started on that. But thank you so much. I will link all of Shelley into the show notes for you guys as well, so you can find more of her, and I'll tag her on Instagram. But thank you so much for jumping on. I appreciate your knowledge and your time, and just, having gone through your own health journey and then now sharing it is just the best.
Thank you so much, Sheradyn. We'll talk soon.